Hey people, got y'all an excellent flick here. I'm going to show y'all the real meaning behind this no weaving spiders here at the Bohemian Club. But not all spiders weave. So back when I was young and handsome, I used to spend a lot of time at the old folks' home talking to old ladies. And I might catch them at dinner. I might catch about 4 of them at the table, and if I want to get a laugh out of some of them and make one turn red, I would tell her I'd knock the cobwebs off that old thing. And so some spiders, they make cobwebs.
So Google will say that this weaving spiders comes from Shakespeare, and it means no work in here. We're not here to work, we're here to have fun. And they try to mix up this word for a cobweb for a weaving spider. But the difference comes in the clade, the intelligence. This is a gynous, and the intelligence is a weaving spider. But this cobweb spider, they try to mix this word up with gold, but very few of them are gold. And you can see there's only one here now. And the rest of these, they move into others, but everything with the C here, this is this chryso. And they don't have a page on any of them. And these were all formerly, and they've been moved to other categories. But it comes from the family. You can read that D as a TH or as a T. And the double I, the first one, becomes the E. And there it hid is, HIDES. And there it hid is. It's that family where it lives in. That's the beast. There and there. And if you read it as a TH, there it hithers in the cobweb. They try to mix this word up with the same word that starts with an X. And you see it here in Revelations 5 too, where they give the meaning proclaiming. And it actually comes from the chorus is where they're getting that at. Coming from the Latin chorus means a dance in the circle. The person singing and dancing, the chorus of tragedy, from the Greek chorus, a round dance. And so that would be a weaving spider dancing in the circle. And the Greek word is of uncertain origin because the original sense is unknown. And so now it will be known. They try to mix it all in this word they say is gold. And it's the same word, chrysalis, that a cocoon that a moth might spin around itself. But it's coming from this there it hithers, the cobwebs, the chryso. So I want to start with a thank you to Jarmy Vicious, who shared my video, and I picked up over 25 subscribers from that. And a big thanks to Lucky Forges for a donation. And you can find a PayPal button on my channel or down in the description. If you enjoy these videos, I've been living off of savings. And so when it's gone, I'll probably be having to go back to work. And I won't be able to make any more movies for a while. So in that last folder of videos, 4 videos, I was reading in Revelations 4, and I read the whole thing. And I think I'm going to do the same thing in 5 here. It's not a real big chapter, and I'll split it up in a couple movies. But it starts with the book with 7 seals. And so a lot of Bibles, they interpret that as the book. And a lot of them interpret it as a scroll. But the word is actually Bible. B-I-B-L. The I-O reads the E. The Bible in. And it's actually pronounced as vival in. This survival, life. The life of in. And these 7 seals, you'll see it in a lot of old church stained glass. This lamb with the cross on, sitting on a Bible with the 7 seals. It's plainly the image of a Bible, not a scroll. And in the Latin, they'll interpret it as Libra. Libra, where library comes from. and it interprets as book. Where they get this scroll from is the right index. You see, this is my right hand. This is my index that I point with. And I point it over here and I can hit the scroll on the right index. And that's coming from over here. It's index went of. The index went of. The index went on the right hand side. You know, in the old Bible, the Hebrew, it was written backwards. And that index number was over here on the right side. And if you were scrolling through looking for something, you were looking on the right hand. But this doesn't mean right hand. It means the index went of. And the next thing is this 7. 7 does not mean 7. Once in a while it means 7. But the word comes from hefty. You know, heft, the weight. You know, and it's secured. You know, the SQR, you'll see that in the Hebrew when it says the book of. It means it's written with security in it. It's all sealed. The secure and the G, you know, can read as the nth, secure on, or the securage is in heft. It's heavily secured. Doesn't always mean 7. Very seldom. Once in a while it means 7 when it means the septa. The septa, you know, is the sword, is the Z, the 7, the cut, and usually you're cutting a dozen in half. So when you cut a dozen in half, you know, your cut goes at 7. So the majority of this interpretation down here, it comes from the Latin, where they have already tried to misinterpret this once and hide the misinterpretation. But, you know, most of the words are opposite. Sometimes it actually means what it says down here, but what it actually says is the opposite. You know, this is hidden, Hidon, and it's actually hid of. But these seals, you know, this security, it comes here. You know, this is a vav. It's never pronounced as a key. It's always a vav, which means and in the Hebrew, but also a W or V. And the N, you know, followed by the E becomes a bet. The Hebrew bet, which is a B or a V or a IN. And the IA becomes a vav. Same as if you were reading key backwards. You get that vav out of it. And it becomes a W, a vav. And then this way is a vav too, a W. And then the IO, you know, becomes a E. That's some security in there. And the G, I'm not exactly sure when it changes. I just always look at it both times because I know not just in the word angel, but other times they'll say it's an N. And then this double consonant followed by a vowel. I read the vowel in between, and sometimes you don't have to because a lot of our words evolve with people knowing what the word meant but not how to read it, and they evolved without it. And then the tet reads as a TH or a D or a T, and I don't know if that's secure. I think that's something that everybody knew. And a big one is the AE, you know, reads as a ESE, and I don't see it in here, but that's one of the first ones I figured out while reading the Hebrew. And hid of if it index went of the ketchum in of if it of drawn of a Bible in the Bible in. And so back in the day, people would read their Bible, which was the book of life, and if you knew how to read it, you knew where to put an index. And so in the front, in the inside cover, and on the opposite end, you would write all the important business going on, all the family births, and you would give it a number to index it back in the Bible, and that would let you know what the day, where the stars and planets were on that day. That was your index. And hid of if it index went of, catch 'em in of, if it of drawn of Bible in, if it drawn of life in, the nigrum men of, the black, the nigger, the black grammar, the black letters, men of, is set in and opposite in. And so the black letters, that's what you added to. You wrote it in the black. It was added later. And you see in the Berean Bible, that this whole chapter here, this is all added later. None of this was in the red letters. And in Revelations 4, it only talked about this medium of a legend. This one old legend it talked about, where it was written on the ceiling in a anabate. But the 3 chapters before this, they're almost entirely all red. And they say a red letter Bible is when Jesus is speaking, but not necessarily, because it says the angel said all this. You see it in 2 is entirely red here. And then in 1 it's mixed up. It's red here on the bottom. It's a legend, telling the legend, the old writings, and then some black. And then another ledge of it's the old writings in the red, and then a bunch of black. And so the nigra is mixed with the gram, a cent a letter, a gram, the black letter, and then the men on and men of. This means of importance. They were feudal chieftains, and they were of the queen. It's the mother's bloodline. The Menon title was passed to subsequent generations matrilineally, the mother line. A title meaning superior person. The negrum men of the setin and the opposite in. And Kate's securage is menon. This is the same word, but not followed by the E. And Kate, to carry out the orders. And it carries out the secure on is menon. So the 4th chapter, that was the first sun set. Adam's last son on the end of the day was set to take the place of evil. And so the setting is at the end of the day. And the opposite in Kate, this is where your word sophisticate comes from. The opposite. You have to be sophisticated to understand this. And it comes from Old English sophisticating, to mix something with a foreign inferior substance. Adulterate. Medieval Latin sophisticatus. To disguise, to tamper with, to trick using words. And that's what's going on here. They often use the opposite. From ancient Greek, sophistikos. From sophistis, master of a craft, prudent or wise person, philosopher, teacher, tutor. To change the meaning of something in a deceptive or misleading way. Distort. And I was reading somewhere that it was Latin to change the meaning of it to something negative, because they were the ones that were tricked. And hidden if it index went of, the catch 'em in of, the fit of drawn of Bible in. Negrum men of, the set in and opistincates, for on his menon, for the sons of the queen. And securage is, securage, SQR in the Hebrew. I read that sometimes as cipher, because sometimes they say it means the numbers. They give it several meanings in Hebrew. The suffrage, securage. The securage is of heft, heavy securage. And hidden angle on England, the angels. You see in Greek, angel and England, both spelled about the same, with a double G. And hidden angle on is sure on. Is sure. When you got a weak spot in a bulkhead, you shore it up with some timbers. You got hit by a missile and you got a weak spot. It's sure, it's strong. Make it strong. Is sure on. And I strongly believe I'm sure on it. Is sure on. Chrysos on Tessin. The AE is a ESE. And Tessin is what goes on at the delicatessen. They serve delicates, serve in Tessin. And the Chrysos, that's the cobweb spiders. The cobweb spiders on serving. The cobweb spiders serve cobwebs. And cobwebs, you walk in, you see cobwebs. It means old. And it's sure on the Chrysos on Tessin, the cobwebs. Phone, common. CHM, common, all it is. And so it's talking about the old English language. And hidden England is sure on a crisis on Tessin. A spider, they say it eats its web every night and rebuilds a new one, which isn't true. I filmed one last year that was just shoring up his web. He made it thicker because a bird had flew through it, but I could tell it was the same web. But the cobwebs, you walk in a place with cobwebs, and nobody's been here for a long time. Cobwebs. You see somebody puts spider webs on their elbows, they'll tattoo them on there. That means they sat in jail for a long time. I've been here to the cobwebs. They won't call them spider webs, they'll call them cobwebs, even though it looks like a spider web. And it's sure on the cobwebs, on Tessin, on serving the phone, phonic. Phonic is a spoken language. Not all written languages were spoken. You can communicate with a written language without having a phone to it. But this is talking about the old phonic language that was common. Common, all it is, that everybody spoke. And before the Tower of Babel, everybody spoke one language. They had one language. There was one peoples. And the old and the cobwebs on Tessin, the phone, common, all it is, access. Who is worthy to open the book? You are given access. It is access, the year it's say to vival in, the year it's say to live in, and loose it as, to break the seals. Loose it as, loose it, to see through. And loose it as, in the double S, this one reads as a if, I-F. If rigid as, of two. And loose it as its rigidness, its stiffness, of ought of, should. Rigid as it should. And how they said when at of into. The O really as a I believe when the O is followed by the E, I believe you slip a V in. But the O by itself also reads as a of. And how they said when at of into, the hour on, the horon. The horon is the big circle around your sundial. The jizz is the penis in old Akkadian. It casts a shadow on the horon. And how they said when at, when that shadow's at that spot. When at of into, the hour on, the horon. And the omega, that's sometimes it reads as a E, sometimes it reads as a O. The omega is the great circle, and it's the end, the hour on end. How epithages, your stance, where your feet meet the earth, where you stand on this situation. And how who EU who a poke at it is just at this gist, under a poke at it under the skirt, this same base word you see us and fuck at, it's where the jizz points at the whore on. And how'd who poke at this gist a year anno it say to violin this life in the year it say to violin. And out is something that was hidden but is now is out. Everybody sees it now. And out, belief in of two. You have to see it to believe it. That's where that comes in. Belief in of two. And of two, that it is a proper word for that. It's talking about the of two of whatever it was talking about before. The it, whatever it was talking about, which was not the scroll, but it was the year it say to live in, out, for everybody to see, belief in of two. And this ego, these marks around it, this just means that it wasn't in every Bible, but it was in this Berean Bible. This Bible reads the same as that other one, pretty much all of it's same. But it was in this Bible. You can see it was here originally. And so I believe this O here is reading as a E. You see it looks like an E, the same as an E turned on its back. And it comes with different marks on it. But I believe it reads as an E like this. And this is we geek. A geek is, when I was a kid, it was somebody who worked in the circus biting chickens' heads off. But in ancient times, it meant somebody who was highly knowledgeable. They were geeks, the same as today. And the geek and the L-A in the Hebrew, I read as a N-O. Thou shalt not is L-A. And so I read this as a N-O-E-N. And the geek knowing many, poly, at, and I-O-E, E-U, at who'd his access. And the geek knowing many at who'd his access, who rich. A year on it say to vival in, out, belief in of it, belief in of two. So this G, sometimes it reads the N, not sure when, but this is possibly, and we know, N-O-E and K-N-O-E. We know in, we don't know in. We know, we don't know, K-N-O-W. We know of many at who'd his access, who rich, anno it say to vival in, out belief in of two. So I'm going to cut this off here and I'll start here. The Lamb is worthy at 5 in the next video. Good day.